The grandfather clock in a marble foyer chimed 5:30 as Marcus Chin slipped through the service entrance of the Ashford mansion. His worn sneakers made no sound against the polished floors as he moved through the shadows of the grand estate, carrying his supplies with practiced silence. The morning light hadn't yet touched the towering windows, leaving the house wrapped in the kind of quiet that only vast wealth could buy. Marcus had perfected this routine over the past 6 months. Coffee brewing in the kitchen by 6, fresh flowers arranged in the main hall by 6:15, and every surface gleaming before the family stirred. He moved through the rooms like a ghost, invisible by design and necessity. In the kitchen, he paused at the window overlooking the expansive backyard where a wheelchair sat empty on the stone patio. Timothy's chair, waiting for another day of frustrated silence. Marcus had watched the 10-year-old boy from this same window countless mornings, noting things that others missed. The way Timothy's left hand trembled slightly when he reached for things. The subtle movement in his right leg when he shifted position. Good morning from around the world, Marcus thought to himself, remembering Emma's enthusiasm when she discovered people lived in different time zones. Where are you watching from? And what time is it there? She had asked the internet videos they watched together. His daughter's curiosity reminded him that somewhere, people were just beginning their day while others were ending theirs. The soft chime of his phone reminded him that Emma would be waking soon in their small apartment across town, getting ready for another day at school. Timothy Ashford sat motionless in his wheelchair beside the floor-to-ceiling windows of the morning room, watching a group of neighborhood children race their bicycles down the tree-lined street. His small hands gripped the armrests as a boy his age performed a perfect wheelie, and Marcus noticed the involuntary tension that flickered through Timothy's shoulders. Mrs. Victoria Ashford swept into the room, wearing her usual expression of controlled frustration, her heels clicking against the marble with military precision. She barely glanced at Marcus as he polished the already spotless coffee table nearby. "The cleaning person is here," she announced to her husband without looking at Marcus directly. "Make sure he doesn't touch Timothy's medical equipment again." Mr. Robert Ashford looked up from his financial papers, his eyes briefly meeting Marcus's before returning to his wife. "Victoria, he's never touched anything inappropriate," he said quietly. Victoria's jaw tightened as she moved to Timothy's chair. "We've spent hundreds of thousands on the best specialists in the country," she said, her voice carrying the weight of exhausted hope. 3 years of treatments, surgeries, experimental therapies. Nothing changes. Marcus continued his work, but as trained eye caught the subtle ways Timothy responded to different stimuli. When a morning sunlight shifted across his lap, the boy's left leg showed a barely perceptible reflex. When his mother's voice grew sharp with frustration, his breathing pattern changed in ways that suggested intact neurological pathways. "Have you ever felt overlooked or invisible?" Marcus wondered as he worked in silence, observing a child whose potential remained hidden beneath assumptions and defeated expectations. "Share your thoughts with our global community," he imagined saying to the world beyond these walls, knowing that somewhere others understood the weight of being unseen. The afternoon brought an unexpected change to the mansion's routine when Marcus arrived with Emma for what Mrs. Ashford had reluctantly agreed was a supervised playdate. His 8-year-old daughter bounded through the grand entrance with the fearless energy of childhood, her backpack bouncing against her small frame. Emma's eyes widened as she took in the soaring ceilings and crystal chandeliers, but her attention quickly focused on Timothy sitting quietly in the sunroom. Without the hesitation that adults carried, she walked directly to his wheelchair and settled cross-legged on the Persian rug beside him. "Hi, I'm Emma," she said with the simple directness children possess before the world taught them to be cautious. "My dad works here. Do you want to see the origami crane I made at school?" Timothy's eyes brightened for the first time Marcus had witnessed, and the boy nodded slightly. As Emma carefully unfolded and refolded the paper bird, explaining each step with patient enthusiasm, Marcus watched Timothy's responses with growing interest. The child's pupils tracked Emma's movements with perfect coordination. His breathing remained steady and controlled. When Emma accidentally dropped the paper, Timothy's right hand moved instinctively toward it before stopping. Marcus continued dusting the nearby shelves, but his mind cataloged every micro-movement, every neurological response that contradicted the hopeless prognosis Timothy carried. The subtle muscle contractions in his core when he leaned forward, the way his left foot shifted slightly when Emma laughed. Mrs. Ashford appeared in the doorway, her expression softening slightly at the sight of her son's engagement, but her voice remained firm when she addressed Marcus. "Please remind your daughter that Timothy tires easily," she said, "and ensure she doesn't encourage any unnecessary movement." Marcus found himself alone in Timothy's therapy room while vacuuming, surrounded by thousands of dollars worth of specialized equipment that sat largely unused. The parallel bars gathered dust in the corner, while an elaborate electrical stimulation device remained unplugged on the medical cart. His eyes moved over charts and reports scattered across the desk, and despite himself, he began reading. The medical terminology felt like a familiar language returning after years of silence. Incomplete spinal cord injury at L2 vertebra. Partial paralysis with potential for motor function recovery. Marcus's hands stilled on the vacuum handle as he absorbed the clinical details that painted a far different picture than the hopeless narrative the family had accepted. His mind automatically began analyzing the rehabilitation protocols Timothy had endured. Too aggressive in the early stages, he realized, studying the physical therapy notes. Not enough focus on neuroplasticity exercises. The specialists had treated Timothy's condition like a mechanical problem rather than understanding the delicate process of neural pathway reconstruction. Through the window, Marcus watched Timothy and Emma in the garden where his daughter was showing the boy how to feed the koi fish in the ornamental pond. Emma had positioned herself beside Timothy's wheelchair, chattering about the different colored fish, while Timothy listened with the kind of focused attention that suggested a sharp, engaged mind. Marcus remembered his own years of study, the countless hours spent learning how the nervous system could adapt and heal when given the right encouragement. He had helped dozens of children like Timothy take their first steps again, back when he had his own practice, before medical bills and bankruptcy had reduced him to cleaning other people's homes while his expertise gathered dust like the unused equipment around him. The next week brought subtle changes that only Marcus seemed to notice. While organizing Timothy's room, he began incorporating small suggestions disguised as innocent conversation. Maybe Timothy would enjoy reaching for things on higher shelves, he mentioned casually to Emma during her visits. Perhaps simple stretching games could help him feel more comfortable. Emma embraced these ideas with the enthusiasm only children possessed, turning Marcus's carefully designed exercises into playful challenges. She would place Timothy's favorite books just beyond his normal reach, encouraging him to extend his arms and engage his core muscles. When they played catch with a softball, she positioned herself to encourage Timothy's rotation and balance responses. Marcus watched from across the room while dusting, noting the gradual improvements in Timothy's muscle tone and coordination. The boy's posture had become more erect over the past few days. His hand-eye coordination was sharpening with each game Emma invented. Most importantly, Timothy's confidence was growing as he successfully completed each small challenge. What small act of kindness changed your life? Marcus wondered as he observed his daughter's natural ability to encourage Timothy's progress. Let us know where you're listening from, he thought, imagining the connections forming between strangers around the world who understood the power of believing in someone's potential. Mrs. Ashford appeared in the doorway during one of Emma's enthusiastic games, her expression shifting from curiosity to concern as she watched Timothy stretching to retrieve a toy that had fallen beside his wheelchair. The boy's movements were more deliberate and controlled than she had seen in months, and her protective instincts immediately activated. Mrs. Ashford's heels clicked with sharp urgency across the marble floor as she approached the sunroom, where Marcus was guiding Timothy through what appeared to be a simple game of Simon Says. Emma sat cross-legged nearby, clapping encouragement as Timothy successfully touched his nose, then his ears, following the gentle commands that were actually sophisticated neurological assessments. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" Victoria's voice cut through the afternoon quiet like a blade. Marcus straightened immediately, his hands moving to the cleaning supplies he had set aside, but Timothy's disappointed expression didn't escape his notice. "We were just playing, Mrs. Ashford," Marcus replied calmly, his tone respectful but steady. Emma was teaching Timothy some games from her school. Victoria's eyes flashed with protective fury as she moved to Timothy's wheelchair. "My son is not a toy for your daughter to experiment with," she said, her voice rising. "His condition is serious and delicate. We don't need amateur interventions disrupting his medical care." Marcus felt the familiar weight of being dismissed, of having his expertise reduced to presumption and overreach. He had experienced this before, when his medical opinions were questioned, when his credentials were doubted. But watching Timothy's face fall as his mother's words reinforced his limitations, Marcus felt something shift inside him. "I understand your concern," he said quietly, but with an undertone that made Victoria pause. Timothy was responding well to the activities. His coordination and muscle engagement have improved noticeably. Victoria's laugh was cold and bitter. "You're a housekeeper, not a doctor. Please stick to cleaning and leave Timothy's care to the professionals who've been treating him for years." The medical emergency happened on a Tuesday morning when Marcus was polishing the staircase railings. Timothy's sharp cry echoed through the mansion, followed by Emma's frightened voice calling for help. Marcus dropped his cleaning cloth and ran toward the sunroom, where he found Timothy slumped forward in his wheelchair, his breathing shallow and irregular. Emma knelt beside the chair, her small hands hovering uncertainly over Timothy's form. He just started shaking and couldn't breathe right, she whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. Marcus immediately assessed Timothy's condition with the precision of his former training. The boy's pulse was rapid but strong, his airway clear. Autonomic dysreflexia, Marcus recognized instantly, a dangerous spike in blood pressure common with spinal cord injuries. He quickly checked Timothy's catheter line and found the problem, a kinked tube causing the distress. With practiced movements, Marcus repositioned Timothy and adjusted the medical equipment while speaking in calm, reassuring tones. "It's okay, Timothy. Your body just needs a little help getting comfortable. Emma, can you give me that small pillow?" Within minutes, Timothy's breathing normalized and his color returned. The crisis had passed, but Mrs. Ashford arrived to find Marcus kneeling beside her son's wheelchair with the kind of clinical competence that couldn't be dismissed as lucky intuition. "How did you know what to do?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Sometimes heroes hide in plain sight, Marcus thought, remembering countless emergency situations he had navigated in his previous life. Have you witnessed something like this? He wondered about the invisible people who possessed extraordinary knowledge while working in ordinary roles. Share your story with us. That evening, Mr. Robert Ashford sat in his study with his laptop open, the screen glowing in the dim light as he typed Marcus Chen's name into the search engine. The results that appeared made him lean back in his leather chair, his assumptions crumbling with each article and professional listing he discovered. Dr. Marcus Chen, former director of pediatric physical therapy at Metropolitan Medical Center. Published researcher in spinal cord rehabilitation. Award recipient for innovative treatment protocols in childhood paralysis recovery. The man who had been cleaning his floors for 6 months was a renowned specialist whose work had helped hundreds of children walk again. Robert found newspaper articles from 3 years ago detailing Marcus's clinic closure, medical bankruptcy following his wife's cancer treatment, liquidation of assets to cover overwhelming hospital bills. The transition from respected doctor to invisible service worker suddenly made heartbreaking sense. The next morning, Robert approached Marcus in the kitchen with unusual directness. "I know who you are," he said simply. "I know what you lost." Marcus's hands stilled on the coffee pot he was preparing, but he didn't turn around immediately. When he finally faced Robert, his expression carried the quiet dignity of someone who had accepted his changed circumstances without bitterness. Timothy is showing improvements that his current doctors say are impossible, Robert continued. His posture, his coordination, his engagement. You've been helping him, haven't you? Marcus nodded slowly. His condition isn't hopeless, Mr. Ashford. The specialists he's seeing are treating symptoms instead of addressing neuroplasticity potential. With the right approach, Timothy could regain significant function. Through the window, they watched Emma and Timothy in the garden, the boy reaching further and moving with more confidence than either man had seen before. The tension in the mansion reached its breaking point when Mrs. Ashford arranged for Dr. Harrison Mitchell, one of the country's most prestigious neurologists, to evaluate Timothy's recent changes. The distinguished specialist arrived with his team, wheeling expensive diagnostic equipment through the grand foyer with the confidence of unquestioned authority. After a thorough examination, Dr. Mitchell delivered his verdict in the formal sitting room, while Marcus continued his work nearby, apparently invisible to the medical professionals. Timothy's condition remained static, the doctor announced with clinical finality. Any perceived improvements are likely wishful thinking or temporary fluctuations. Complete recovery is medically impossible given the extent of his spinal damage. Victoria's face hardened with vindicated resolve as she turned toward Marcus. You see, she said, her voice carrying the weight of expert validation. The best doctors in the country confirm what we've known all along. My son's condition cannot be improved by amateur games and false hope. But Robert stepped forward, his businessman's instincts recognizing when expertise was being dismissed without proper consideration. Dr. Mitchell, he said carefully, what if someone with extensive experience in pediatric spinal rehabilitation disagreed with your assessment? The neurologist's laugh was patronizing and dismissive. Mr. Ashford, I've been treating these cases for 20 years. No amount of wishful thinking or internet research can change medical reality. Marcus felt Emma's small hand slip into his as she stood beside him, her 8-year-old wisdom sensing the adult's conflict. Dad, she whispered, Timothy believes you can help him. Shouldn't that matter more than what the scary doctors think? The simple truth from a child's perspective cut through the room's tension like sunlight through storm clouds. The words left Marcus's mouth before he could stop them, cutting through the room's tense silence like a surgeon's precise incision. Actually, Dr. Mitchell, I believe Timothy's prognosis is far more hopeful than your assessment suggests. Every head turned toward him with expressions ranging from shock to outrage. Victoria's face flushed crimson, while Dr. Mitchell's eyebrows raised in amused disbelief at the audacity of a housekeeper challenging his medical expertise. Marcus set down his cleaning supplies and stepped forward with a quiet confidence that had once commanded respect in operating rooms and rehabilitation centers. My name is Dr. Marcus Chun, and I've spent 12 years specializing in pediatric spinal cord rehabilitation, he said, his voice steady and professional. Timothy presents with incomplete injury patterns and preserved neural pathways that respond positively to targeted neuroplasticity interventions. Dr. Mitchell's condescending smile faltered as Marcus continued with clinical precision. His autonomic responses indicate functional connectivity below the injury site. The muscle contractions I've observed suggest motor neuron preservation that could support significant functional recovery with appropriate stimulation protocols. Victoria stared at Marcus as if seeing him for the first time, her worldview shifting beneath her feet like unstable ground. You're a doctor, she whispered. We're building something special here, Marcus thought as he watched understanding dawn across the faces around him. If this story touches you, let us know where in the world you're watching from, he imagined saying to those who understood what it meant to be misjudged based on circumstances rather than capabilities. Robert stepped beside Marcus, his support unmistakable. Perhaps we should listen to someone who's actually helped children like Timothy walk again. 3 weeks later, the mansion's therapy room had been transformed under Marcus's guidance into a comprehensive rehabilitation center. Dr. Mitchell had departed with his bruised ego, replaced by Marcus's carefully designed program that treated Timothy not as a hopeless case, but as a child with extraordinary potential waiting to be unlocked. The moment everyone had been working toward arrived on a sunny Thursday morning. Timothy sat at the edge of his wheelchair, his hands gripping the parallel bars that Marcus had repositioned for optimal support. Emma knelt nearby, her encouraging smile radiating the pure faith that only children possessed in the face of impossible dreams. "Remember what we practiced?" Marcus said softly, his voice carrying the gentle authority of someone who had guided dozens of children through this same terrifying and miraculous transition. "Your body knows what to do. Trust yourself." Timothy's face showed a mixture of determination and fear as he slowly shifted his weight forward. His legs, strengthened by weeks of targeted exercises, trembled with the effort of supporting him. Marcus positioned himself within catching distance while maintaining the space Timothy needed to achieve this victory independently. Victoria stood frozen in the doorway, her hands pressed to her mouth as she watched her son attempt something she had been told was medically impossible. Robert's arm wrapped around her shoulders as they witnessed the culmination of Marcus's quiet expertise and unwavering belief. Timothy's right foot pressed against the floor, then his left. With Marcus's steady encouragement and Emma's delighted cheering, he lifted himself from the wheelchair and took his first independent step in 3 years. Then another. The sound of his feet against the hardwood floor echoed through the room like thunder. 6 months later, the Chun Pediatric Rehabilitation Center opened its doors in a gleaming medical facility funded by Robert Ashford's grateful investment. Marcus stood in his new office, wearing a white coat again for the first time in years, watching through the window as Timothy ran across the playground with Emma, both children laughing with the pure joy of childhood friendship restored. The center's waiting room bustled with families who had traveled from across the country, drawn by the story of the housekeeper who had helped a billionaire's son walk again. Each family carried their own hopes and fears, their own children who had been dismissed as hopeless cases by traditional medicine. Victoria appeared in Marcus's doorway, her expression transformed from the cold dismissal he remembered into something approaching humility. "I wanted to apologize," she said quietly. "I was so focused on protecting Timothy from disappointment that I nearly prevented his miracle." Marcus smiled with the grace of someone who understood that fear often masqueraded as rejection. "You were being a mother, Mrs. Ashford. That never requires an apology." Through the intercom, Emma's voice echoed from the children's therapy room where she volunteered after school, encouraging a young girl taking her first tentative steps. Timothy's confident voice joined hers, both children having become ambassadors of possibility for others facing similar challenges. "Thank you for joining our global community," Marcus thought as he watched healing happen in real time. If this inspired you, subscribe and let us know where you're watching from around the world. He imagined saying to those who understood that sometimes the most extraordinary gifts come disguised as ordinary service, waiting for someone brave enough to see beyond the surface.